Hello and welcome to Tech Perspectives. I'm your host, Gabriella Power. Today I'll be joined by some of Australia's leading experts and policymakers from our technology sector to take a look at what opportunities there are around new tech and how it can stimulate the economy in this post-COVID era. Coming up on Tech Perspectives, Australia's digital transformation during COVID-19 has been lightning fast. We'll take a look at how this has been achieved. The future of Australia's workforce in the technology sector. Are there enough of workers to bridge the skills gap? And investing into our future, what can be done to boost the tech industry? Joining me on the panel is Dr. Ian Offerman, New South Wales Chief Data Scientist from the New South Wales Government and Industry Professor at UTS. Dr. Yenny Tim, School of Information Systems and Technology Management at the University of New South Wales Business School. And Max McLaren, Regional Vice President and General Manager, Australia and New Zealand at Red Hat. Welcome to the panel. Thank you for joining me. Before we get into it, the ACS Australia's Digital Pulse provides an annual stocktake of the country's digital economy and workforce. And as we prepare to get back to business in this new kind of normal, how important will it be to focus on this area of the economy and what is the potential for growth? An unprecedented year battling coronavirus and business shutdowns, triggering a transformation in the tech space.
The last 12 months, Australia has gone through a digital revolution.
John O'Mahony is a partner at Deloitte. He says at the start of the pandemic, it was expected businesses would pull back on digital projects, but the opposite occurred, with millions of Australians forced to ditch the office and work from home.
Now, for the first time, Australia's technology workforce numbers over 800,000, creating an extra 30,000 jobs in technology in the last 12 months alone.
Some sectors adapting better than others.
The healthcare sector, the education sector, they have created a lot more technology jobs. But in some traditional sectors, like agriculture and in mining, despite their growth, they haven't created jobs in technology. Some of them have actually declined.
Like the rest of the world, Australia's economy suffered, shrinking by 1.1% in 2020. But it's bouncing back at high speed.
Technology has been critical to how Australia has remained resilient during the downturn. Think about what happened in our schools, in hospitals, in people transacting with government. A lot of Australians were very open-minded about using technology tools to do the sorts of things they used to do in person. And that's a big reason for why there's been so much growth in Australia's technology workforce over the last 12 months.
The digital space will continue to be crucial as the nation recovers.
We're forecasting that over the next 5 years, Australia's technology workforce will grow to 1.1 million people.
The future is female. Currently, only 29% of Australia's technology workforce is made up of women, but there's a huge opportunity to bridge the gender diversity gap.
New modelling for this research shows that if we can accelerate female participation in technology, it could be worth $11 billion to Australia's economy over the next 20 years.
Businesses are increasingly turning to automation, but John says this will drive the workforce to grow.
While technology can replace some jobs, mostly it augments jobs so that humans can focus on what they do best: solving problems, working in teams, innovating and collaborating. And that's why even in the era of automation, there will be many job opportunities in Australia.
Despite a year like no other, the future in tech is looking even brighter. Future is looking bright, and we've all experienced how transformative COVID has been for us in the workspace and in the way we live our everyday lives. Ian, what do you make of the speed of Australia's digital transformation during coronavirus?
So for years we've been experimenting or slowly moving along with some trends of telework, telehealth, teleeducation. Corona gave us a view of the future. We very rapidly jumped into telework, teleeducation and even telehealth. And what I genuinely hope is that going forward, we don't snap back to where we were, but we take advantage of what we've learnt, and also the fact that we can build productive, constructive workforce environments, which are all based on tele.
Yanni, what are some of the benefits and also the pitfalls of this new way of working and studying?
Yeah, so I think the way that we are transforming our way of, working and learning really creates new opportunities for everyone. So if we are talking about the higher education context, then we are talking about students being exposed to so much more opportunities. For example, in the past year, I've seen there are so many new programs, there are new initiatives around the world, and they are all being made online. So I think from a young graduate's perspective, I definitely think the new opportunities would be there, and I hope that the young graduates and students are basically taking advantage of that. And the new ways of working, I think flexibility, autonomy would definitely be something that our young graduates or younger generation would, they really prefer, and they can definitely excel in this context. So I see a lot of opportunities.
Max, what does this new way of working mean now there's this renewed energy to the economy?
I think one of the most interesting things that's come out in the last few months and years is just the pace of application automation. So, the traditional way that you interacted as a customer or as a citizen with your provider was generally face-to-face. That's evolved into an application digital environment. And the way to do that as a provider requires a significant amount of investment, not just in technology, but in how people are interacting with that technology. And that, I think, is the most exciting thing that's come out in the last few months.
In my own family home case, we all upgraded very early on in the COVID pandemic, and that's just paid dividends. So systems that used to fail or used to occasionally sort of drop out are just not acceptable when your only presence is online. Scaling that up, of course, as we look across what governments and what industry have done, those that invested either early or were prepared certainly did a lot better, and those that were not prepared really found that they had a substantial weakness. So I think, or I hope, I believe that the value of IT, the value of cybersecurity built in as a design principle, and also the value of privacy built in from a design perspective really should be seen as very important investments for any organisation.
Max, just on cybersecurity, have these changes with the coronavirus pandemic resulted in chief information officers or CIOs being taken more seriously by boards?
Well, indeed. I think not just the cybersecurity piece, but the fact that technology has become the core to business success. So the CIO now is, if he wasn't before, a significant part of the core team to drive the business forward. And the interpretation of how to do business in the digital era is the critical success factor for, I'd say, the majority of businesses. And they provide that.
Yanni, I have to ask you, have your students enjoyed learning online, or do they miss the face-to-face interaction?
Yeah, good question. I think actually a few of them would say they enjoy the convenience of being, online, but definitely a large group of them, I would say, they really miss that human interactions. I think we all are, so it's really just human nature. And even for myself, I do really miss that human interactions. And I think it's important because building a community is also part of the education experience. It is not just about getting access to the content, but it is about knowing people, build that connection and grow together. So those things we need to do, I think, face-to-face.
Yeah, absolutely. It was amazing how quickly, when COVID and lockdown happened, people went straight to their phones to FaceTime and do all those things, but everyone did miss that human connection. Ian, I want to talk to you about bridging the gender diversity gap. We need to get more women in the tech space. Currently, there's only 29% of them in the tech space. How do we go about getting more women involved?
So I think that really is a very important challenge, and I think it comes down to a couple of different aspects. I think we need a mindset shift. So I think if we continue to have people in positions of senior leadership who look like me and talk like me and act like me, will wind up just perpetuating that. The second point is I think we need to reach back much earlier into the educational system. It should be okay for young girls to want to grow up to be an engineer. It should be okay for young girls to want to grow up and have a career in STEM. And there are some pretty strong bits of evidence that say it's around about those early teenage years that decisions are made about what to do. And if you can't see a career pathway that helps you change the world to be a better place, a lot of young girls switch off, whereas a lot of young boys like the idea of the tech. So I think that the problems we really care about require diversity, a different set of skills, a different set of perspectives. If we don't really work hard to undo the mindset that we've grown up with and think about those points of disengagement, then I think we will keep perpetuating what we've got, and I don't think we can afford to do that.
Yanni, have you noticed an increase in female participation?
I would say yes, actually. So I teach a few technical courses at the business school, and cybersecurity, programming, computer networking, and so on. I do see a lot more female students started to be interested in the field and be, really more engaged. But also, I think the point that having role models would be really important, because it is not just about, not just at the recruitment phase, I would say. So we wanted to recruit more women, definitely, but the retention is also something that businesses should think about. So if we are saying that women is underrepresented in the tech industry, then they join a company, then they might feel, less connected or, even isolated. And if they don't have the sufficient opportunities to demonstrate leadership, then, they might actually choose to leave that environment. So retention is important. So providing opportunities continuously for underrepresented groups in organizations, I think that would be very important to kind of sustain that change and making sure that we have role models for young, female students to really look forward and really join the tech industry.
Max, it's not just about equality, it's also there's a huge economic benefit to getting more women in the tech space.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I like to try and think about how to create the positive influence to attract women to the industry. And hopefully the approachability of being involved with technology all day, every day in one's life starts showing them that there's an exciting future in moulding that interaction with organisations. And as I said before, every organisation, every government now has to interact more intently with people in a technology space. Just think of our Service New South Wales app, where we get into every restaurant or bar or shop that we want to go to by using our phone, and creating that attractiveness to interact more in a highly fidelity type way, I think is important for attracting more and more people, not just women, but more and more people to tech, because we're short across both genders. We need more and more people in the industry.
Max, how do you do this at Red Hat?
Yeah, well, we're an open source company, so we attract input from anywhere in the world to help build our technology, and a lot of those people are female. So what we try and do is we try and create an even playing field. We try and do all the sorts of things about accelerating females in our organisation and in terms of contributing to our ideas, and hopefully that creates a good, attractive environment. And I think one of the most exciting things for us in the industry is that it's a relatively lucrative industry as well. So hopefully it attracts people to the industry because they see there's a good opportunity to make a dollar at the end of the day.
Ian, has this digital transformation attracted newer or more people to the tech space?
I think it's made everybody much more aware of the importance of technology, and not only to carry out business, but also to remain connected with the rest of the world. So that normalisation of technology as something that we must engage with, I think has been very, very useful. And I guess the proof will really be in what happens next. So people's awareness has been raised, the importance has been understood, investment plans are now much more focused on bringing this to life. But if we can't then attract the people into the careers which build the pipeline for us to build the tech workforce of the future, then we've actually created more of a challenge for ourselves. So the signs look good, but we're yet to see. And having conversations like this, I think, is really quite powerful. Talking about diversity right up front is really quite powerful. And again, normalising the conversation to say that, well, anybody could be in the tech sector. Many, many people will be touched by the tech sector, and we know we've got an expected demand for tech sector. I think this is a very useful conversation to be having.
Absolutely. Well, we have to take a break, but coming up, is tech where the job opportunities of the future exist? Stay with us. The workforce is evolving fast.
You could expect 40 to 60% of existing jobs to not exist within the next 10 years.
It's never been more important to get ahead of the game.
Like any time in history, people have to be thinking about what is next. However, the pace of change is so great that what might have been next for you within a 10-year horizon is suddenly becoming what's next within the next 2 to 3 years. That's the big difference.
Colin Dominish is the Regional Director, Southern Hemisphere of GHD Digital. He says these are the key factors currently shaping the tech space.
The impact of artificial intelligence, the hand-in-hand approach that we need to take with that around ethical AI and cybersecurity and how cybersecurity can protect, the use of big data and data analytics to be more effective in predictive decision making, and an understanding of how to share that data and visualise it with people.
There's also an increased focus on innovation and collaboration, and businesses must ensure they're upskilling their staff.
So it's a mindset, it's a way of thinking about how can we advance in what we're doing.
GHD is looking to the future on where the world needs to advance.
There's certainly a huge focus on our biggest and most scarce resource, which is water, and what we do with that. And I can see that the environment and sustainability is going to be so important for the future of the planet.
A challenge for the tech industry in Australia has been losing talent to overseas markets, but that's changing as more opportunities emerge on home soil.
I've seen some fantastic steps forward around innovation hubs and precincts recently, a stronger focus on R&D within our academia and industry, and a hunger within government to adopt more innovative approach. And I don't think we necessarily need to look too far to find that. I can point out some amazing examples in my backyard of what's happening in that space. We've got amazing people in this country doing amazing things.
What comes next is yet to be seen, but Colin says we can add value to society through diversity, inclusiveness and collaboration.
That's where innovation happens, when you're bringing diverse people together in an inclusive, collaborative way from anywhere on the planet to think about how things could happen in a better way.
Welcome back to Tech Perspectives. I'm Gabriella Power. On the panel this evening is Dr. Ian Offerman, Chief Data Scientist from New South Wales Government, Dr. Yenny Tim from UNSW, and joining us now is Regional Director, Southern Hemisphere, GHD Digital, Colin Dominish. Welcome to you all. Colin, we just heard from you there about the exciting stuff of what's going on, innovation and how it adds value to society. What does the future of our workforce look like?
Well, I think, Gabriella, that's the big question on everyone's mind. Where do we go next? How do we get there? I don't know that there's one simple path for society to take. However, I do know, as a country, we need to be thinking about what do we pay attention to, how do we invest in a better future, and take some risks around that. Try and see where there are new things that might be exciting for us to venture into that could lead to that new future.
Ian, how do we go about upskilling our workforce?
I think that really is a very, very important question. So once again this year, the Australian Computer Society will put out a digital pulse that says that we have a growing gap between the demand for skilled workers in some pretty fundamental areas like cybersecurity, but also in some of those emergent areas such as artificial intelligence. And it really needs to be a national response to that demand. So there's a role for the primary education, there's a role for secondary education, there's a role for tertiary education, but also to take seriously the need to adapt to a rapidly evolving demand set. So lifelong learning, and governments and businesses also thinking that it isn't enough to end with a qualification, but to actually focus on constantly adapting.
Yenny, I want to get your thoughts on that as well. How do we go about upskilling, and also what are the soft skills needed in the IT space?
I really think the soft skills, or usually I call them human skills, would be, things that machine can't do. So that's what I usually tell my students or people, if you are really good in learning, if you are really good in human skills such as empathy, creativity, social intelligence, critical thinking, and being able to really adapt to different situations. So that's really something I think would be really, really important, especially in the tech sector, because if we are able to combine the human skills with technological competencies, then we are really future-proofing our jobs, because that is how we can move forward and identify applications related to new technologies or designing new technologies that could, apply to solve existing or new problems.
Then amazing things can happen. Colin, can you talk us through what are the different needs for the various industries?
Well, I think every industry has to rethink how they're going about things, but what we've seen already in an Australian context is there are some industries that are actually leading the charge globally, are making a huge difference in the way they go about doing things. So the Fintech sector, the services sector, we're seeing some amazing things happen. There are other sectors still playing catch-up, still trying to get their head around where does technology make a difference for them going forward. And I would encourage people to look around the world at what's out there and understand what might come to our shores and be of value in all of that, because the last thing we would want is Australia not keeping pace with the rest of the world with the changes going on.
And do you agree? And also, how important is it to boost our ICT skills?
So one of the things when we talk about future workforce, it often seems a little bit in the future and a little bit scary, but really a lot of the technologies we're talking about are with us right now. So the need for a basic level of understanding about data sharing and use, data governance, AI, is something that we all need right now and will increasingly need that. We don't need to be deep experts, but there's a baseline uplift which I think is quite important. So I said that we need to think about this from as far back as primary school, then secondary school and so on, because there's that basic level, just data sharing and use, that basic level of understanding of what you need to do, the governance frameworks around it, is something that each and every one of us need. It's a little bit like needing to understand enough maths to get by. We all need some basic tech capability, and that's something that really we should see a concerted effort in.
Yanni, just following on from that, how important is it that classroom education on upskilling, and also beyond that, what should businesses and employees be doing to upskill?
Yeah, definitely. So I think learning about how to apply technologies, exactly like what Ian was saying, is really a key component, because we have available technologies, and it is from research we see that we don't know how to apply those technologies. So we need people who are able to understand not just the technology, but also the problem that we have. So the business problems, and identifying use cases, even identifying the right questions to ask. So those are the things that we teach and we focus a lot in university. And I think in organizations as well, we need to really provide that opportunities for people to think about, how can I contribute to this new development, provide the upskilling, the reskilling opportunities, and really promote that learning environment. I think that's the key.
Colin, what are the risks if we don't do this?
Well, I think we're seeing some of those risks play out already in some industries that haven't advanced. The impact on productivity, the impact on being able to keep your job. COVID has unfortunately been one of those experiences where some industries hit much more than others, and having to repurpose and reconsider where to next. Technology has a similar sort of impact to businesses that can't think about what does our new model need to be and where do we go to next. I think the size of the change is so important for organisations to consider. I've seen figures of somewhere around 6.5 million new digital workers required in Australia by 2025 to cater for that change that needs to happen. And by digital worker, I'm simply talking about people that have to adopt technology and digital thinking into the way in which they do their business in order to stay relevant. And that's an impact that's much further and wider than what we've seen with COVID in terms of the transformation that needs to happen across the nation.
It is such an exciting space to be in and to be talking about. Ian, how's the government supporting the tech space?
So there are a couple of really good initiatives which are taking place. So the part of New South Wales Treasury that's looking at the growth of some of these new tech sectors, such as Fintech and RegTech and AI, they're getting quite a lot of attention about how to actually help that grow, that sector grow. But there's also some really pragmatic things. We are looking at procurement. So how do we procure AI solutions, which typically will be innovative, not tick-the-box sort of applications. So we're actually starting to tackle procurement of innovation, which certainly speaks to SMEs. There was also a really important initiative recently announced that said that upwards of 20% of the total budget would be spent on SMEs, which also speaks to innovation. So there's a few exciting, really far out there things, but also some pretty fundamental reforms that are taking place in order to make it work.
Yanni, what else should we be looking at in terms of jobs of the future?
I think we really wanted to promote diversity. So that's something that I see a lot because my area is in cybersecurity, and I think that industry is really lacking diversity. And in general, ICT sector, I think it's suffering from the consequences of not having diversity. And the reason why I say that is because we kind of try to get people who fits a certain stereotype or certain role that we think, this is the technology role, we need to get these kind of people. But actually, if we promote diversity and get sufficient people to join the industry, we would have innovation, we'll have creativity, we'll have different thoughts coming in. So I think that is creating the space for everyone to be involved in the future, jobs and development. And that's one of the key factors that I say we need to really think about.
Is there enough investment? Do you think there's enough investment being done in the education space?
I would say we need more. So it's definitely something that we are trying to promote and develop further because there are a lot of initiatives that are going on. For example, partnerships between industry, also government with higher education. But we do need resources to support those because it's not as easy. You need to really get, alignment between industry people and government and then higher education to work together and really to promote that. We are already doing that, but I think definitely would love to see more development in that space.
Colin, do you agree?
I do agree. I think the real challenge with understanding where to next with investment is there being enough to go around, but also having some key ideas around where it should be put to biggest effect. I'd have to agree with Ian's point that it starts with education and it starts early. So getting things like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity into the agenda of our curriculums for even primary school students, just to have that understanding, that little bit of math that Ian referred to, is the type of investment that will pay dividends for the long term.
Ian, are you surprised with the rate of growth there has been in the tech space?
No, not at all. If you think about how much the world has been changing, and then if you cast your mind forward, the world of, for example, 2030, where we spend a lot of time thinking about infrastructure needs, we are in the good old days. We will never see the rate of change so slow ever again. So I really do expect that if we keep putting in place linear responses to an exponential challenge, eventually we run out of steam. And I think we still have time to really start to ramp up our activities and put in place some of those fundamentals, tap a diverse workforce, contemplate working with 3 generations of people in the workforce now. I think we really do need to start accelerating. But I think this is, as I said, this is the good old days now.
I love that, the good old days that we're in right now. Yanni, it's also important to get more women in the tech space. Women only make up something like 29% in the tech force. How do we do that? How do we achieve the gender diversity gap?
Yeah, definitely education is one key. So start early. Definitely, I agree with both panelists about that. And how we actually promote that awareness and interest in education system is also important. So we have to really break that, a stereotype about technology or ICT jobs being just, that kind of maybe hackers in hoodies kind of, perception. But it's really a lot more than that. So if we are able to expose our female students from primary school all the way to higher education, expose them in, the jobs. So we let them experience it. We let them see it. And as soon as they see it, they experience it, they tried it, they would know I can actually contribute to this space, and they would really be interested to go into the space.
Yeah, well said. And watch this space. We do have to take a break. But after the break, what's holding our Australian entrepreneurs back, and how can we invest in our tech future? Welcome back to Tech Perspectives, and joining the panel with Dr. Ian Offerman, New South Wales Chief Data Scientist, New South Wales Government and Industry Professor at UTS, is Liberal Party Senator Andrew Bragg, and Siobhan Casey, Director of Scale-Ups and Innovation Labs at ACS. Good evening to you all. Thanks for joining us. Before we get into the panel discussion, which we will do in just a moment, one tech company that has been able to achieve phenomenal growth during the pandemic is Unleash Live. And it's all been made possible with the support of the ACS Innovation Lab. Take a look.
Unleash Live is a live video analytics platform. We essentially measure reality, and we do that with machine learning algorithms. We support local, state and federal authorities to manage their operations, especially during times of crisis.
Well, it's come at the right time in the age of coronavirus. How does this technology help with managing people flow and social distancing?
We work with transport agencies, not only here in Australia, but also in the US. For example, we work with Miami-Dade County, where we help the authorities to manage their service levels and the capacity of the train network. Here in Australia, we work with Transport for New South Wales. One of the big challenges is to measure face mask adherence to ensure safety and security of any commuter.
How does Australian Computer Society help support Unleash Live and help it grow?
We love it here at ACS. We are very fond of the space. It's a great place to build products, to collaborate, to socialize, but it's also very helpful for ACS to set the agenda with the federal government on important topics such as digitalisation and AI ethics.
This technology just has so many positive impacts. Why do you want to see growth in the technology space?
It is essential for Australia to keep up with sectors that are in demand and that are required to be competitive at a global level. And AI is one of them. If you insert AI into your operational processes, you are faster, you can do things more cost effective, and you can provide ultimately better services to your clients. And unless AI is really a technology that is adopted by larger industry in Australia, Australia might fall behind these trends. So it is essential to keep up with them, and younger companies like Unleash Live are the catalyst to drive this growth.
What does the future of the tech industry look like to you?
Well, I think machines and machine learning will be essential elements to assist humans to perform better and faster and at larger scale. It will augment what we do. I don't think it will replace us as creative individuals, but it is essential to really drive digitization and have processes being supported by technology and AI to work more efficiently and just have a more fulfilling workplace.
So tell us more about the future of Unleash Live. What does it look like?
Well, Unleash Live, we are growing really fast. COVID has actually helped us a lot to highlight the importance of real-time data and real-time insights for cities and transport networks. So for us, that growth will continue. It's the new normal to get better and faster insights to provide those services back to citizens and to the operational staff managing the complexity of cities and transport networks. So for us, it's been a great catalyst. We are growing not only here in Australia, but COVID has also helped us to open new markets through digital sales. We don't need to spend endless time in planes anymore. We actually sell digitally here from Australia into the world.
Let's get straight into it. Siobhan, how has Australia's startup and scale-up community fared through COVID-19?
Well, not all as good as Hanno and his team. Great to see him showcase. They have a great business and they've done really well through COVID because of their particular offering. I think one of the things I've seen through a number of entrepreneurs is a real gap in pre-seed, so less than $1 million, and seed funding, notionally $1 to $3 million of funding in the last 12 months. So what we're seeing is VCs really doing follow-on rounds to their existing portfolios rather than contributing to new ventures, which has been a little bit challenging for people in the last 12 months.
Senator Bragg, what new innovation should be supported through growth on the back of this digital transformation?
Well, I think the pandemic has shown Australians the value of technology because they could order a pizza, they could work from home. I think about 45% of people were working from home during the peak of the lockdown. So I think the opportunity for Australia is to keep on digitising business and keep on digitising our economy. I mean, to be digital is to be alive. And to not be digital is to be dead, I think, in many respects. So I think with the pandemic now behind us, or in large part the worst part of it, I think the opportunity for us is to keep on digitising.
Just some of the things we're seeing now is actually digital is not really the differentiator anymore. Off the back end of COVID, from a customer experience point of view, it's considered almost, it has to be there. And then from an employment point of view, it's a sense of the market is now global. And we're seeing entrepreneurs employing people from other countries into roles that we don't have enough skills in Australia for.
I think it's a really interesting conversation. I loved what the little section there on Unleashed Live. It shows a couple of things. It shows that there's no shortage of good ideas in Australia, and we don't have a natural disadvantage when we're moving bits around than when we're moving atoms around. It's a whole lot easier to ship a software license or a software update than it is to ship a ton of coal. It also means that being in Australia, we don't have a disadvantage in terms of trying to access different markets. So being digital means that many of the tyranny of distance issues go away. Not all, but many of them do. The fact that these folks are selling into the US is fantastic. The fact that the people are hiring people from other parts of the world is also fantastic. And again, that's not without its challenges, but it does mean that all of a sudden we move much more significantly into a global marketplace.
Yeah.
I think it's worth picking up that point that there are two things here from the government's point of view. The first is how much capacity do you have inside the private economy to be digital and to be adaptive? And the second is then what are you doing to export that expertise? And the Prime Minister has established Jane Hume as the Minister responsible for effectively getting businesses digitised, with the focus being on small businesses, which are the least likely to be have that capability. And then more broadly, the question is how do we export things like Fintech, which we've actually developed a really strong capability in over the last 5 years.
Siobhan, what fields are attracting investment at the moment and how do we make sure the right people are investing in the right areas?
Yeah, look, I think it's fairly well spread in many ways, but going off the back end of this digital move, anything that sort of pertains around that. So, machine learning, I think we heard Hanno reference the same thing, machine learning, AI, cyber, data sovereignty, these things are really important. Smart cities, smart places, I think is an extension of that. So that, again, that experience within a city and where that will go in the coming 5-10 years. So that to me is where people are going, but also if you look at where humanity is moving, entrepreneurs are fast behind solving those problems. So things like food tech, environmental concerns, water tech, these things start to become a secondary kind of focus area.
And Ian, how will investment now in the tech space create more jobs?
So that's a great question. So there are some fundamental tech skills that we absolutely rely upon. We absolutely rely upon cybersecurity and the ability to move and appropriately handle data. Every single job in the future will be dependent on those capabilities. The important thing is when we start to talk about emerging tech, so fintech and regtech and agtech, these are the areas that have enormous potential for growth and potentially could create enormous wealth for Australia and a much more diversified economy. Being able to build the skilled workforce we need to actually to meet that opportunity, to meet that challenge, I think is the problem that still sits in front of us. That's the one that we must rise to. And investment in different levels of the educational system, and that simple point is that we're never done with education. There's a constant learning required in order to adapt to these needs. So I think there's some different thinking needed about that total life cycle of learning.
Senator Bragg, what about mandating super funds to invest a fixed proportion of their assets in a startup? Is that a good idea?
Well, I mean, the 2 points I make here is firstly, we need to, in the absence of being able to improve our tax competitiveness, I mean, for example, we haven't been able to pass a company tax cut, and now with the new US administration in place, basically saying the era of tax competition is over. If we want to attract more investment into the tech sector, then we need to be prepared to deploy measures like patent boxes and particular regimes designed to bring investment onshore. In terms of super, I mean, I think super is a huge experiment, which is a big failure. I mean, who could conceive of a scheme that would cost the budget more than it saves when it's about savings? And there is no projection that shows that it will ever get people off the pension in large part. So having said that, I am of the view that we should try and fix the scheme rather than make it a system full of holes. Because I think once you say, OK, 5% for tech, then you've got 5% for farmers, 5% for all your other little schemes and crazy ideas. I just think the super trustees should be managing their portfolio in the best interest of the members. We shouldn't be compelling them to invest in anything, but we should make it easy for them to invest broadly, including into tech.
Yeah. I wouldn't be a proponent of mandating funds in super going into tech, and we have examples of Spaceship Superannuation Fund, which really came to their the marketplace and attracted their customers. Obviously, we have choice of super funds because they, had their backbone was about investing in tech. So I think where you give superannuation funds the opportunity to show where they want to have their presence, and people and customers will follow. So not a big advocate of that. But I just wanted to add on to what Ian was talking about with the skills gap. I think it's a real issue. I know it's well documented, but it's at the front line with tech businesses. You're seeing it all the time. So we've either got, the import component. Do we import some skills? And of course, in a normal non-COVID environment, that's, we have people come in for periods of time. You then have a skills update. So updating the relevant people in tech, or skills transfer. Where are the people coming from other industries, and how are we attracting them to look at transferring their skills, maybe as an accounts clerk to being a cyber analyst? How do we have that discourse, and how do we have the funding to support that?
What's holding Australian entrepreneurs back? Is there anything that people are doing overseas that we're just not doing here?
Look, I think in the short term it pertains to both things. It's the funding in the short term, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong in starting a business, and getting it right often includes luck and timing and all the rest of it. And two competing businesses that have very, very good offerings. One may get better resourcing because of their network or funding channels or resourcing to work in that business. So if we can fix some of the resourcing challenges and funding challenges, I think we'll be going a long way.
Ian, what do you think? What's holding Australian entrepreneurs back?
So I definitely agree with what Siobhan has said, but I think there's also a role for government as a smart buyer that we haven't really embraced. So there are a range of different programs in different parts of the world, the US and the UK in particular, where government can be a smart buyer. Part of that is there's a whole lot of reasons for it. But in New South Wales, we have committed under the AI strategy to actually build out a better way to procure AI solutions, which typically means then from a range of small to medium-sized enterprises, and also that procurement reform where New South Wales has said we will purchase 20% plus from small to medium-sized enterprises. That still needs some detail to work through, but that at least signals that New South Wales is going to be a smarter buyer, and it's challenging for government to do that, but I think that's actually part of the solution.
It's important to note that there have been a lot of successes. You've got 6 or 7 unicorns, you've got Afterpay, you've got Zip, you've got Airwallex, you've got Safety Culture, you've got all these different fintechs. Plus you've got the ASX, which has become an exchange where people are coming from offshore to list in our country. So, of course, there's always room for improvement. And as an outward-looking economy, we're always looking to try and up the ante and compete with Singapore and Canada and the like. But we should also reflect on the fact that we have built a strong, and I hate this expression, ecosystem, but there is a critical mass now of fintech companies in Australia.
And what's the government doing to support this?
Well, I mean, I think Ian would be in a better position to comment on the New South Wales government, but I think the state government has actually developed, I think especially through its focus on getting the tech precinct down at Central Station up and running has been a big thing. I mean, in Canberra, we're more focused on, okay, how can we get the tax and regulatory settings right to promote Australia as a destination for investment, but also a destination and a place where good ideas can be developed and can actually stay onshore. And one of the issues we'll look at in the current Senate review is this concept of having a patent box. So effectively the idea is if you are developing an idea that you export you can have a discounted tax rate. So that is an incentive to keep that business onshore.
And just picking up on what New South Wales is doing, there are quite a few intersecting or interlocking bits of policy and strategy. The AI strategy is quite specific. It includes that procurement piece. The Smart Places strategy, again, talks about different reforms that allow technologies to be trialled and to be piloted. And the data sharing strategy is also trying to create environments where people of different stripes, companies of different organisations and so on can actually operate together. So there's a few interlocking pieces, but honestly, procurement is one of those areas which has been a perennial, and if we get that right, big things will happen.
And Siobhan, the ICT sector, what can we do to boost this?
I think it kind of brings all those topics together. It's, from my point before, it's about funding, it's about, employment opportunities or people with the right skills. I think, just a little bit off the back end of what New South Wales is doing, Sydney Startup Hub in York Street, obviously more recently moving the scale component down to Central. I was in the Sydney Startup Hub prior to joining in my role recently. There is not always a lot of rigour around startups, though, and around making sure that they're on a right trajectory to ensure that they have the rigour to survive or to scale. So I think it'd be great to see some more programs around helping startups do that, rather than just kind of be in a startup space and hopefully wing it for the best of their business. So there's a bit more to be done.
Senator Bragg, final thoughts. How do we invest our dollars in tech?
How we invest our dollars, the taxpayers' dollars? Or?
Yeah, Australia. Where should the investment go?
Well, we're not in a position to try and pick winners, I hope. There are probably mixed views on that in Canberra, but my view is the role of government is to try and make Australia as competitive as we can be, and especially when you see jurisdictions like Hong Kong come under duress for political reasons, we should be looking to attract the best people and the capital from other countries like Singapore and Canada, because this country has always been in competition for the best people and for foreign capital. And even despite our large superannuation pool, which I'm sure many people think is a great idea, we're still heavily reliant upon foreign investment. So we should maintain our outward disposition.
Ian, final thoughts for the future of tech and what it looks like? There
are some really exciting new emergent areas. Fintech, I think, is off to a great start. Agtech, I think, is an area that is still got a lot of potential. And of course, you mentioned smart cities earlier. There's so many technologies which underpin those. There's an abundance of opportunity.
Siobhan, final thoughts. What does the future of tech look like?
I was going to answer a question before what and Senator Bragg's talked about, but it's that risk appetite that entrepreneurs have, and you constantly need that to survive and to try new ideas and test out new approaches. So it sort of underpins our entire ethos to kind of test new things. So keep testing, keep trialling, keep the communication going with government and getting the right policies in place so we can thrive.
Senator Bragg, Siobhan, Ian, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
That's all for Tech Perspectives today. On our next episode, we'll be looking at the smart cities of the future. The 2021 Digital Pulse annual report detailing the state of the Australian IT industry is available on the ACS website. Shari is up next here on Sky News. Thanks for your company.